Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for dialing in to today's webinar series, which I think is now week 11 on the Land Management 2.0 series, a platform that Tim Hopkin, founder of the Land App, came up with. Really is an idea to stimulate ideas, conversation and debate across the rural sector. So Tim, thank you very much for that. My name's Ed Barnston. I'm the owner of Barnston Estate, and I'm a 2019 Nuffield Farming Scholar, and I will be your chair for today. For those of you that have dialed in and not entirely familiar with how this works, don't worry, it's all very straightforward. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we strongly encourage you to get involved, ask questions, and I'll endeavour to try and weave some of those questions into the conversation as we go along. If you have to dip out at any stage and rejoin later on, or have problems connecting, all of this will go out across social media, and you can watch it again on YouTube, and there'll be an opportunity to watch any other of the previous dozen or so roundtable discussions that we've been having. Today is quite an auspicious time. It's the year of the 1000th Nuffield Farming Scholar. So for those that are either applying, a particularly strong welcome to you. If you're just escaping the heat and coming indoors to a bit of shade and cool, well, you're still welcome as well. Charlotte Merson is the lady at the Nuffield Farming Scholarship head office, and any specific questions, direct them at us or at her at the end of this conversation. So over the next hour, sit back and listen to four wonderful panelists, all Nuffield Farming Scholars, a wealth of experience in all slightly different areas, but across the rural sector. So I'm going to be turning to Tom first, as you are going clockwise around my screen. By way of an introduction, let's start with you. Could you just give us a minute or two, who you are, where you're from, what you're up to, and a bit about your story?
Thanks, Ed. So I'm the fourth generation to farm at our family farm in Essex. My grandparents moved down from Lancashire and Yorkshire respectively in the 30s, as was a lot of people moved down from the north to the south in the time of the agricultural depression back then. We traditionally was a mixed farm here in Essex, but we've latterly focused on combinable cropping, sale of the dairy herd, went out of pig production. And so we're now contract farming about 1,250 hectares. We've got a large equestrian centre, a bit of solar. And I guess for me, what sparked my interest in Nuffield was that where we'd got the history of livestock on our farm here at home, and then we're taking on contract farms that didn't have that history of livestock, what we were seeing was a massive difference in the fertility of the soil. And I applied to look at the sustainability of UK arable farming. We decided that was too big a topic, and I narrowed it down to soil fertility because that was really what had sparked me to apply. And basically, it was about how could we recreate the benefits of livestock without having the livestock themselves. So it was called soil fertility and fertilizer use efficiency, but you have to call it something. And it was all about how we manage the soil sustainably for the future, with a focus on soil organic matter. And yeah, I mean, it's still something that I'm very passionate about now. I'm married to Emily. We've got two young children, and so life is pretty full on from that point of view. Back at the end of February, I was lucky enough to be elected as NFU Vice President. So I'd done 2 years as the National Crops Board Chairman, 6 years on the National Crops Board, and then now as Vice President. So that's something that is a very daunting time at the moment with all the challenges around COVID, and then on top of that, you've got Brexit and trade opportunities or threats as you may see them. But it's an incredibly exciting time, and I think the future of our industry is being set, here and now for the next decade and beyond. So we've got a wonderful opportunity as UK agriculture to really shape our future, and I'm fortunate to be involved right at the coal face, as it were. And I guess really that's, I've been very lucky to represent the industry and the BBC Harvest programme and as an AHDB monitor farm. And yeah, it's something that I thoroughly enjoy and hopefully can continue doing for a few years to come.
Tom, that's fantastic. What a great introduction. Thank you. Matthew, turning to you, tell us all about yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Matthew Currie. First off, can I just emphasize to everyone that everyone's welcome, and whatever your range of skills and ability, it's about the passion that Tom showed when he was interviewed. It's about the topic. It's about making a difference to your business, your loved ones, your region, your industry, and representing the UK wherever you go in the world. I've been very fortunate. I was a scholar in 2000 and studied in US and America, and it played really well into my area of expertise and my profession. I'm a director of food and farming in Savills now. I was an equity partner in Smithscore at that time. What I found was I went to find how to become a better consultant, and I came back finding that if I asked the right questions, everyone else became better consultants and were able to solve their own problems. And that was a really important. I went away wanting to become better at myself and came back wanting to help others be better. And that was a really important time. It's had a big impact on my family as well. I'm married, 2 growing up, very successful children who have a passion for traveling, and that was partly as a result of them traveling with me in Australia when I did my Nuffield. I have interests in farming and renewables. We publish a magazine. In fact, we publish a magazine which has several awards and a range of skills required, much of which have been honed, meeting people just like this panel, as it were, and driving your desire to make a difference. And that's one of the things, as a Nuffield selector, I'm fortunate at the moment, I'm one of the panel of 5 Nuffield selectors. And one of the things I would say is I'm continually looking for continued commitment and passion to whatever you're doing. It's not the fanciest idea in itself that makes a difference. It's driving your passion and seeing opportunities to make a difference. So really pleased to be here. As ever, I'm humbled in the company I'm in. I always go away from Nuffield experiences saying, Matthew Currie, you're going to need to do better, because there's just such wonderful people. And I encourage everyone to network Nuffield scholars, whether you apply for scholarship or not, get involved in one way or another, because it will make a difference, and you'll enjoy every moment and you'll have a lot of fun.
Matthew, that's fantastic. What an inspiring and interesting 20 years, and it feels like there's plenty of energy. It's fueled your thirst for more travel, more learning, with a network of tremendous friends. That's wonderful. Phil, turning to you, if we just have a bit about you, please.
Thank you, Ed. Good morning, everybody, and great to be on the panel. Very, very quick skip round my background without going on about myself too much. I prefer to talk about Nuffield. Like Tom, I'm a 4th generation family farmer. Like Matthew, I'm a 2000 Nuffield scholar. I come from North Wales, where we farm an upland beef and sheep farm. 50 years ago, my father diversified into a caravan park business, which has really seen us through the highs and lows of agriculture. Slightly challenging today, but that's created, if you like, a mentality in our family which drove an interest in the direction of my Nuffield Farming Scholarship, which was continuing diversification from our land assets. So diversification, a blueprint for success, was the snappy title that we put on it. I went to Harper Adams, studied agriculture and land management there, worked for Savills and Carter Jonas, so I'm trained as a land manager. and came home in '99 to manage my neighbour's estates, a chap called Lord Newborough and the Rhug estates. And from my Nuffield travelling and looking at diversification, we've effectively spent 20 years implementing the benefits of that Nuffield learning in New Zealand and Australia, with my countries of travel, where we've set up a meat business, a retailing business, and a renewable energy business. So we're trading both on the estate and then into the southeast of England, into high-end restaurants. And then when the pound crashed, in the last crash, the Nuffield gave me the confidence to take the business overseas. So we trade heavily in the Middle East and Far East, and continue to do so even with the lockdowns today. And then Nuffield, I think one thing that hopefully that everybody listening in will get a gist of is Nuffield never stops. It's not just a scholarship that you do for that 18-month period. And that psychology just carries on through. So now, having hopefully delivered for the Newborough family, I'm back on my family farm doing an awful lot of work there, where we've built an AD business, a biotech business, which is now operating on 3 continents around the world. And that continues to grow. So the learning grows, and Nuffield is an intrinsic part of my life. It's not a bunch of males that do this, even though you're looking at 4 males on the screen. I was lucky enough that my wife, Sarah, also was awarded a Nuffield Scholarship, and it's done a phenomenal amount for her and very much put her career on a trajectory as well. So it's great for personal development, it's great for industry development, it's great for community development, and like anything in life, as much as you put in, you'll get out, as much as well. So there's a bit of a jog through, Ed. I hope that covers a few things.
Phil, that's fantastic, thank you. And we're very honoured to have Tim May, who is, unsurprisingly, with this wonderful weather, busy silaging. So I'm going to hand over to Tim, and if there's a pause, it means that the connection has dropped. Tim, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. If you could just give us a quick overview, please.
Oh, sure. So, yeah, I'm a 2011 scholar, same as Tom Bradshaw, same year as him, and actually same as Philip and Tom as well, so, 4th generation farmer. We farm in Hampshire, between Newbury and Basingstoke, and I did my scholarship on, I wrote all about sustainability, understanding and implementing sustainability, but that was, I changed my subject as I went along. I started off, I was supposed to be looking at land value and how I could influence land value, and as I went round, I got more interested by the idea of sustainability and what that meant and how I could implement that into our business. So I came back, and a couple of my other scholars done a lot of work on reintroducing, putting grass into arable rotations and mob grazing cattle and the power of soil carbon and that sort of thing. So I basically sort of copied their recommendations and implemented them on the estate here. And we've gone from a completely arable farm to a mixed farm, organic now, with using a lot of grass in the rotation, and trying to make everything mobile and using lots of partnership agreements to make it all work. So yeah, that's basically what I'm up to. And I think my person might have come to take over for me in a minute, so I should be able to get on a proper computer soon.
Tim, thank you. That's perfect, and that's great to have you all forward. Give a quick spin about who you are. Tim and Tom, just talk about Nuffield in terms of the application process. How does that work? What's a typical sort of applicant? And I suppose some people would say, do they need to be a farmer?
Look, see, I think it's open to anybody who's working in related industries to agriculture and food production. And I think the diversity that it brings is actually the strength of Nuffield, because if everyone was farmers, then we can be a pretty rare bunch. So I think that actually having that diversity brings a balance to the discussions and the debates that you have. The application process, it's pretty straightforward, really. But I think that something that Matthew said is that really what the selectors are looking for is the passion. It's the spark in the eye. it's not about academic achievement. It's about you as a person. Is there really something that has sparked your interest that you can look to deliver? And I think so. The process, the application process, is about filling in a form by the end of July. So anyone on the call that's looking to apply, the deadline is now looming pretty large. So I'd recommend cracking on with it. But it's filling in a form, it's selling yourself, and it's getting you to that interview. And the interview itself is reasonably daunting. You don't quite know what to expect, and you walk into a room with, you'll have 5 selectors, but you could have another half a dozen people from some of the sponsors who are checking you over to see whether you sort of meet the criteria that they would like of a Nuffield scholar. So it was a really exciting time. I think that if you believe that you've got something that you can help the rural industry and food production deliver, then there's something which is of interest. And I just get on and apply, because I've had an amazing time out of it, and it really has helped develop my career into what I do now. And I'm sure I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't done my scholarship.
And Tom, once you've finished your application, you've been through the interview and you've succeeded in that. How does the next 18 to 24 months look like? Do you do a CSC and a GFP?
Yeah, well, so the calendar's slightly different to when we did it, because our interviews were actually either late January or early February, and we started our scholarship about five weeks later. Whereas now it's far more appropriate. I think the interviews now are in October. You go to the Nuffield conference in November, although unfortunately there's no 2020 Nuffield conference because of Corona. It was due to be held in Essex, and I was on the periphery of the organising committee. But it's a real disappointment that we're not going to be able to have a conference this year. But you'd normally go to that conference, and from there you've got 2 years to presenting your finished report. But it really all starts in the spring of the following year after application. So we'll be looking at March 2021, when the Contemporary Scholars Conference, which is all the scholars from around the world in that particular year, meet together. Our Contemporary Scholars Conference was in New Zealand. Which sounds amazing, but traveling to New Zealand for 7 days is actually pretty full on, especially when there's a lot of early mornings and late nights, which are part of it. But meeting all those scholars from around the world was, for me, I think it does start changing the way you think. I mean, we had inspirational leaders which come to talk to us. It was the time of the Christchurch earthquake, and the leader of the student army came and spoke to us, and he'd literally set up the student army in Christchurch to go and do any non-dangerous help that they could provide for the emergency services. So it was an incredible time. I think of it very, very fondly. But those bonds, those relationships that you build with others are really powerful. And I think it does just help shape the way you view farming and food production and the role of that in for society, but also in managing climate change and other things. Some really intense discussions, but it's a great starting point.
And Tim, in terms of the travel, which has come up from all of you repeatedly, a great opportunity to be going around the world. What is the purpose of all this travel? And in your experience, which countries did you get to?
So I went to Brazil, then America, and then Kenya and Tanzania. And the idea of the travel is really is to try and find the exemplars of whatever you're studying in wherever it is in the world. But to be honest, you probably find exemplars in any country you go to. So it's also about broadening your own, developing your own skills really, and your own knowledge. So I kind of try and get people when they're asking me about what sort of scholarship to do. I try and which countries go to. I try and get them to go somewhere where enough people don't typically go. Try and get off the beaten track and try and expand the whole sort of the network of places that future scholars can go to. So no, I would say definitely it's all about going to as many sort of far-flung countries as you can, because you can get the experience there. That was my experience. Does that help?
Tim, no, that's perfect. Thank you. And it's very clear that the idea of travel broadens your horizons, helps build knowledge, and finds things that you might not necessarily have done. People talking about smelling the coffee. You've actually got to be there to really experience it firsthand. And one other thing that repeatedly crops up is this idea of the light bulb moment. Phil and Matthew, what is the light bulb moment? And from a personal perspective, was there a moment in your global travels where you thought, aha, this is something I really need to introduce back home?
Perhaps if I'll answer first, Matthew, I'm sure you'll have some thoughts. Probably the biggest light bulb was probably more of a general than an individual piece of recognition or inspiration. I think the sheer fact of being away and having time to think and time to talk and mull it over and process both what you're learning and what you've left at home is immense. And for me, that was really good. I would say also having the opportunity to see people that were quite candid was a light bulb. So you weren't just looking for success, you were looking for, perhaps failure is a strong word, but people that hadn't succeeded in what they were looking to do. And again, I learned an awful lot from that. And I think in my daily life now, I think I'm always trying to somehow carve out time to think, and also trying to look at what didn't work as much as what did work and understand the reasons why. So I guess those are my two answers, Ed. I don't know, Matthew, if you've got some thoughts.
I think linked to the current pandemic, COVID-19, we were actually 2,000 scholars were in the middle of foot and mouth. So I was halfway through my travels when foot and mouth struck, and came back to the farm, and not surprisingly, America didn't particularly want to see me. So I didn't get permission to travel in America. But I got to hear locally here, I'm based in Dumfries and Galloway. We were badly affected in Dumfries and Galloway with foot and mouth. And I got to hear about effectively a summit in what was the foot and mouth bunker to organise the recovery from foot and mouth, as it were. I didn't get an invite to that, but I actually got worked out when it was and went and knocked on the door and said, some of the things I saw in Australia while I was away, I just made for the recovery program, as it were. The doorkeeper said, well, you're not on the list. And as a result in Nuffield and building confidence, I said, well, I bloody well should be on that list because I've got something to offer. So it kicked up enough of a stir to get the chairman out of the meeting and got an invite in, much to the annoyance of the civil servants at the time. But the next day I got an invite from the then Minister of Agriculture, or Secretary of State for Agriculture, to join him on the recovery group. And over the next 18 months, we were materially involved in finding ways and finding people to deliver solutions post foot and mouth, as it were. And I'm absolutely convinced I would not have had the confidence, and I wouldn't have had the skills and seen what was happening in Australia to go and have that meeting. So that would be number one. I'm also always struck by, I met a telecommunications engineer that had 35 years very successfully in Australia as a high senior executive, as it were, took his retirement, was absolutely bored, and started milking cows in a Rotary parlour. And before long, he was the pit boss in that Rotary parlour, as it were, and he sat up as if a bit like pit bosses and croupier in Las Vegas. You get to all sorts of places in a Nuffield Scholarship that you don't talk about while you're proposing your travels, as it were. And he sat up there and watched time in motion, watched everyone, as it were. So I got a day with him and spent a day. And at the end of the day, he said to me, he said, well, Matthew, I'm sorry I haven't been able to answer all your questions today. And he said, you're a bugger, excuse my French, but he says, I'll have 4 days of research now to get worked out what the answer should have been and why it was important, or if it's important to my business. And that to me sums up Nuffield, and people continue to ask me questions, and I think, well, why are they asking that, and should I know about it if I don't know about it? And it's a great way, it's a great organisation for, and the diversity that Tom spoke about in terms of farmers, non-farmers, and those that have come into farming as a first generation. Everyone has a contribution to make. Everyone can ask the sorts of questions that Nuffield scholars need to be thinking about and the industry needs to be thinking about.
Matthew, thank you, and to you, Phil, as well. Just turns to the Q&A. Rupert Turnbull has asked a couple of questions. He is a young, recently qualified land agent at Fisher German, I think. What's the value of Nuffield scholarships to wider society outside of rural land management, and when is the optimum time to undertake the adventure? I'm going to open that up to the floor, but Phil, as a land agent, perhaps you might be best qualified to answer that one.
I'll go in reverse order. Optimum time, because I just remembered that comment. I'll come back to the first one. Optimum time, I think, is there's no perfect time. I think you just need to grasp the opportunity and get on with it, unless there's something very substantial happening in your personal or business life. It will take a lot of organisation, but what you do tend to find is that your family, your team, staff, colleagues generally are excellent and rally around and support you, and actually you see them develop while you're away as much as you develop while you're away. In terms of age in your career is perhaps one answer I could give. I did mine when I was 28, which is perhaps a little bit younger than average, but that isn't an issue whatsoever. Top end, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, I think it's 45 would be the top end of the application date. So to be honest, it's here and now. And I would say also the burning topic that you perhaps might want to do is as much about you and what you feel a passion about to go and discover, because that will then translate into broader success for the application, that message, both for you individually and for the greater good of the industry and the wider community, be that your parish, be that your nation, or anything in between. So I would say timing is not overly relevant, and hopefully I've just touched on the first part of the question, the benefit to the wider society. Agriculture touches everybody. We feed everybody, therefore the tentacles grow and go further. So, if you were to go very specific, you might have someone that is a farmer that wants to look at diffuse ammonia pollution and come up with solutions for that, and that would affect agriculture, but it would affect society at large. So it just depends on your topic and how that then goes broader. So I hope that gives an answer.
Fantastic.
Could I just interject? William Morris, Lord Nuffield, gave £10 million in the 1940s because he recognised the link between health and good agricultural practice. And that has never been better proven than the last few years. So it's as relevant. He recognised it in the 1940s and set up the Nuffield Foundation, which we now benefit from, Nuffield Farming Scholarship benefits from. And the recognition then is as true and as complete today.
And I think when you look at the value to wider society, I mean, if you look across the agricultural industry at the leadership roles that are taken up by Nuffield scholars, it does have a lasting impact on us as scholars. And we're forever putting back into an industry which ultimately we love and we want to see thrive. But it's far more closely linked to anyone in society than many people have realised. And I think this pandemic, for a lot of people, has actually reconnected them with food production. For the first time in generations, back in the start of the lockdown, there were people genuinely worried about where their food was going to come from, something we haven't had to worry about for generations. And so I think it's incredibly pertinent that that Nuffield is driving the boundaries around farming, rural life, And I think it's more relevant than ever. And as we look at we've got to start thinking about food as being part of a healthy life and a healthy healthy diet. And so I think there is great opportunity moving forwards for what Nuffield can put back.
Well, that's perfect. Tim, turning to you now. What was the defining moment of your Nuffield journey? I mean, looking through your CV, it's very illustrious with breeding ewes, beef cattle, arable. You set up an array of interesting, diversified aspects at Kingsclere. Was that because of Nuffield? Tell us about that, please.
My defining moment, I think, actually was from the time I had to sit and read books while I was in between visits and traveling and that sort of stuff. I actually got enough time to sit and reflect and stuff. That was my I think my biggest thing, and I started reading about economics a lot, and I realised that we had to keep growing our businesses just to keep ahead of inflation. And that was, for me, it was a really important bit, because until someone sits down and explains the compounding nature of interest and inflation, you don't realise how big a deal it is that you've got to keep your business growing. So that sort of spurred me on to keep growing, and to keep looking for new enterprises and keep all that stuff going. But I think the other thing that Nuffield did was give me permission to go on and carry out those crazy ideas. The things I'd learned, or the things that had been ticking away in my head. All my other fellow scholars were also doing crazy things, so I kind of had permission, and almost I expected it of myself that I ought to go off and do something that wasn't what all my neighbours were doing, if you know what I mean.
Thanks, Tim. And turning to Tom, if you could just add your view on that, please.
What Nuffield did for me was give me perspective of global agriculture that I hadn't got before. And I purposely set out to look at everything from organic agriculture through to GM in South America, to see what I thought the future of UK agriculture should look like. But without seeing those, the extremes, if you want to call it that, or the latest technologies, being utilized in different ways, I think it would have been very difficult to have that global perspective. So I think for me, it was that part of it which I fall back on regularly now, is thinking, what should the future look like? And I learned far more from some of the organic producers than I did from anybody else on my Nuffield Scholarship, because they really do have to make the most of every input they utilize. But I also believe that if we turn our back on technology, then we're going to make it incredibly challenging to feed a population of 9 billion in the future. So I think that there's a hybrid system of production that we've got to look at for the future, which is the best of organic, the best of conventional, the best of technology, the robots that are coming. And actually, it's a really, really exciting future. But it's only going through that process of looking at all the options that you get to that point. And I know for me, the most challenging part was going to the Acres USA conference in the States, which is a sustainable farming movement, but it's very, very ecologically focused. And I was having to justify everything we were doing in conventional agriculture: the use of pesticides, the use of fertilizers, the use of monocropping, and actually to go through that experience of being challenged and then coming out the other side with answers as to why we do it, and still believing, we've changed hugely, but still believing that it's right to utilize those technologies, I think is really, really valuable.
And let's talk a bit about the impact that Nuffield has had, both professionally as well as personally. You're all very successful with your professional careers. Phil, would you want to start off and talk maybe some about the renewable energy or the glanthlamine ideas?
Yes, yeah. So we've expanded and developing the business, having got the core bit of the business right, and looked at areas of development. So when the Energy Act came in, whenever it was in 2010, an opportunity popped up. So we've jogged through the majority of the renewables in terms of the various heating technologies, wind, solar, hydro, anaerobic digestion, and implemented those, which has really put an extra tier on. And also try and remember why we're doing it. So if I was to say, perhaps talk about my family business more than Rhug with the next comment, where we were just about getting an IRR, an internal rate of return of 5% through the business. And we think, okay, how do we drive this on? 5% is okay, but it's not amazing. So having done that renewable exercises, we've taken that to 10%. And then the other thing you mentioned, galantamine, for example, is how we're targeting with biotech to get our business up to a 15% IRR. And then it's getting a bit more interesting as a business. So galantamine, for example, is where we take daffodils, we grow them at altitude above 1,000 feet and stress the plant. We don't know why or how we stress the plant. We've tried it in laboratory conditions for nutrient, temperature, barometric pressure, all the variables, daylight hours, and still haven't really understood why it works. But we extract galantamine, take out key alkaloids, and those key alkaloids are doing a number of things. One is the best treatment for dementia as an anti-dementia process. One is for childhood brain leukemia treatments. And ironically, we've had a call from China recently, and we're in lab tests in Germany, which is using one of the alkaloids for a coronavirus treatment. So we're working with the Germans, the Chinese on that as we speak. So yeah, there's lots of developments, lots of different things that we're doing. And again, I would pin probably a lot of that on Nuffield, simply because you using Matthew's comment earlier, you have the confidence, but also I'm afraid you do have a network. Perhaps I shouldn't apologise for that. Nuffield is a global network that you go and introduce yourself to, and you can just access people in senior positions a lot more readily just by having the benefit of enjoying a Nuffield scholarship.
Excellent, Phil. Very different, galantamine and energy, fantastic. Matthew, the impact professionally and personally, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm very entrepreneurial, but I want to just touch on the personal side and the things that have made a difference that way. I mean, we've been very blessed. Our businesses have been successful, and we've had the opportunity to do lots of things that we might. I'm convinced we would not have had otherwise. A personal story is that we were one of the fortunate things we were able to do is both our kids qualified, and it was a major 30th wedding anniversary, and we went on safari to Africa, as it were, and it was one of those where basically you set up every night in the bush, as it were, and all you had to do was talk about life and what was important and all the fun things that families do. And it really cheered us up that both of our kids highlighted the traveling while I was doing my Nuffield, and also the impact it had on our life after we came back, as it were. And that was young kids at that time, but they'd come to recognize later in life the impact of it. So I think it can touch, and certainly with us, it touched all our family and our wider family, as it were, and it made a difference in all sorts of ways. And I know a couple of friends who have set about, didn't do Nuffields, but said, well, I'm not going to do a Nuffield, but I'm going to apply for this scholarship or make a difference in another way in the local community. And that's really, it's a really powerful thing. I think one of the things I'm struck by when I consider selection of people is all the other different things that people do. They juggle really busy lives, and it's tough. Farming is tough, agriculture is tough, business is tough, will be no doubt for the next 12 to 36 months. But finding time to do things that create the triple bottom line, actually improve your health, improve the social aspects, is really important. And that's another area that is you see is driven individually right through Nuffield scholars, and also those that you go and visit. It really matters. Finding time to do other things that you wouldn't ordinarily do.
And there is such a broad array of different topics that you have all touched on, whether it's dairy, arable, whether it's business. At the end of the day, they're all very much rural focused. But the experience of a global focus program, a contemporary scholars conference, traveling around the world, getting the breadth and experience, of course, that is largely made possible by sponsors, to which we are enormously grateful. There are a broad array of sponsors. So Tom, turning to you, because of course, NFU Vice President and NFU have been a very loyal supporter, as indeed have Savills, Matthew, and many others. And unfortunately, I cannot mention all of them, but can we just acknowledge the sponsors for a moment, please, and how that operates?
Yeah, well, I think we better clarify there. It's the NFU Mutual, not the NFU itself, that are the sponsors. So, but you know, I'm sure the Mutual would like a bit of recognition. So, thank you very much, the Mutual. But my sponsors were actually Alan and Anne Beckett. So, very much we're treated as family, really. So, Alan Beckett did a scholarship in the '60s. He went off and looking at. He was a dairy farmer at the time. And he was looking at dairy, but he came back and went out of dairy and started egg production, intensive egg production. And he had an incredibly successful career. But he said it's all down to Nuffield. And actually, what they've reinvested as a family in sponsoring Nuffield scholars is quite incredible. And you know, they live through Nuffield. They get a lot of enjoyment from seeing us develop as scholars. And you know, they are. Yeah, I guess it's their legacy really is what they've put back into Nuffield, and you know, just about all Nuffield scholars will know Alan Beckett. So you know, he's a sort of living legend among Nuffield. But it's, you know, I've been very fortunate to get to know them, and it's very generous of them to put that money back in. But like you say, it just would not be possible without the sponsors. And you know, I guess they all feel that Nuffield must be delivering, because you wouldn't put back into Nuffield year after year. If there wasn't something meaningful coming back to farming, to rural communities, if it wasn't delivering for them. So you know, we're very thankful for their ongoing support, and long may it last.
Matthew, did you want to add a comment on that at all, about sponsorship and the importance it plays?
I mean, we're Savills are very privileged to be involved, and we love hosting. We love hosting at our main office in London, because then the connections and the relationships that's built is really important. It inspires our young food and farming graduates and our wider rural graduates to see that investment and be involved in that. And it's as with Savills, we're continually trying to innovate, and the innovation and the thinking about tomorrow's agriculture and how the industry might be shaped, and where tomorrow's leaders are it just matches so well the profile in terms of what we're trying to do. And as a selector, I see lots of sponsors who come and sit in, and the constant message is that it's very inspiring for them. They're going back to the boards and saying, this is an organisation we really must be involved with. They're making a difference. The brand, we're so fortunate. We've got an excellent director in Mike Vasher at the moment, who is approachable but is making a difference. Yet again, each director has been fantastic in their time, and the brand is just built, and we've been very fortunate in that. And the challenge now is that there's so many people knocking at our door, the trust door, in terms of wanting to be involved and help, and it's making sure that our mission is still met, and everyone has the common goals and the commonality, both sponsors and the trust, as it were.
Matthew, that's perfect. And the key word that leapt out for me was approachable. So for any of those aspiring applicants, if you have any queries following this, do get in touch with Mike Vasher or the office. They are there to help wherever they can. And now we've got Tim, who's joining us. I don't know if he can hear us. He's mobile, clearly. Tim, I just want to talk a little bit about one of the questions which has popped up. We're clearly in a very uncertain world. Much is happening economically and with society. The question here is, if you could change one thing overnight in the food and farming industry, what would it be and why? So as you're in your tractor cab, perhaps that could be handed over to you.
Yeah, and if I had the perfect answer would be to be able to relocalise everything and reconnect my local community to my produce. Because yeah, if that's to me seems to be the biggest barrier to doing different sorts of farming, is that you've got to compete with someone over in Africa that lives in a tin hut, or compared to us lot that don't. That's, it just makes our whole life and trying to do a more equitable sort of system harder. So yeah, it would be about relocalising the trade system.
That's great, Tim. Thank you. If we come back to you, if we could just try and reduce some of that wind, please. It's just causing a bit of background distortion. Tom, turning to you, in your role as NFU Vice President, I'm sure you've got plenty of thoughts on this to contribute.
Yeah, I've got plenty of thoughts, but I haven't got an hour to give the lecture, Ed. So I've got to try and shorten it down. I think we have learnt a lot through COVID. About the vulnerability of just-in-time supply chains. We've seen a lot of people have actually started shopping more locally or online deliveries when they may have not used online deliveries before, because actually that's been the way that they feel that they could shop safely. And I really do think that the critical part of this for me is about there's been a real willingness, a real desire to support British production. And we've seen that with beef demand over the last 12 weeks. It's been quite incredible. We were really fearful of the beef price, but actually the demand to buy British beef has been really, really welcome, and it's helped stabilise the beef price, at a level now that we hadn't. We're back at the peaks over the last 12 months. But I think that when I look at the Crown procurement, things like the NHS, I think society would be absolutely devastated if they realised that their journey back to health starts with mainly frozen food and just about all imported. And to me, there is a huge opportunity there that we really have to spell out the message of what a critical part of the health journey food is, and give people what they deserve when they're on their sick beds. They don't deserve the poorest, they deserve the best. And we've got to try and help develop a food system which can make sure that that our Crown procurement can justify buying locally produced seasonal produce where possible. And so that's going to be a huge change for society, a huge change for those mass caterers who provide for the Crown estates. But I do think there's a massive role to play to make sure that that people get the food that they deserve when they're on their deathbeds, as it were.
And Phil, one of the key philosophies of Nuffield Farming Scholarship is about making a positive difference. Is it possible to try and influence policy and change direction if you haven't been a Nuffield Farming Scholar, or does it absolutely help because it slams doors open and it gets you into positions where you can influence and try and deliver a better outcome?
I think it very much does so, and I'll first answer that from a Welsh perspective. With devolved government, the ability for access to power, whatever your views are of devolution, you can get to people in power a lot easier, certainly in a smaller nation such as Wales, and have their ear. And then it's up to the intelligence and skill of your opinion and argument as to whether you'll sway political views. But certainly, when as farmers we've not been happy being able to make that change, that can be by consultation, or indeed we've done that via judicial review. So successes have been achieved in a Welsh basis. From an English basis, what I talk, because I don't know any farming businesses in England, but talking to farmers across the border and Nuffield scholars across the border, it would appear that they do have that access and that ear of government, and I think increasingly so now, where all of a sudden, we heard it that farmers have become key workers all of a sudden, and actually valued for what they do, alongside a great many other people who work long hours in less than ideal conditions. And whether we can keep up that appreciation by our nation post Corona, we shall see. But I think as farmers, I'm a firm believer, and Nuffield scholars hopefully as farmers that get the opportunity to get off the farm and influence a little bit more, it's up to us to make that endure and to make that change, not just to expect our representatives, for example, Tom and his teams. It's up to us as individual farmers to push and make that happen. But the opportunity is there, and we need to ride, it's a bad choice of words, but ride the crest of the wave that we're currently on. As Tom said, we've seen a beef price that's delivering a 40 pence per kilo fat price boost at the moment that we didn't see in February. And it's perplexing why. I think some of it has been the supermarkets, for example, have done actually a very, very good job of balancing carcasses at a difficult time. So it proves it can be done, and that is exciting. And I think as Nuffield scholars, we're always excited about the future and the opportunity, and it's up to us to get up and make it happen.
Thanks, Phil. And Matthew, I know certainly from your thesis, you mentioned change is inevitable, progress is not. And given that we are experiencing tremendous change, how do you think Nuffield has stood you in better stead to respond to what this might play out?
Well, I think you're constantly looking for opportunities. You're constantly looking for the ability to make a difference for yourself, your businesses, your employees, and the wider. I'm really, it's been very tough, and some of the businesses I'm involved in, will they survive? I think we'll wait and see. But what I am excited by is there's quite a lot of research developing in terms of people wanting to have green space now, being prepared to consider remote working on a permanent basis, as it were. And that's one of the things I'm excited about UK agriculture in the countryside, because for too long we've had a brain drain to urban, and I'm excited by the opportunities that will, in this circumstance will give in terms of bringing people back to the countryside, and I look forward to many more first generation country dwellers applying for Nuffields, as it were, because I think there will be, and there's research that's clearly showing that we can make a difference with and get new skills and new energy and new ideas into the countryside. We need to encourage that.
And sadly, it now looks like we've lost the connection with Tim. I imagine that he is racking up some more silage somewhere. So with about 5 minutes or less to go of the remainder of this discussion, let's put our thoughts now, if we could please, towards those that are about to submit an application. Final thoughts, final piece of advice that you would offer? Sorry, I should have specified that that's open to anyone, but I presume also that you're prepared to make yourselves amenable for a conversation after this. But Phil, I did see a very quick hand come up. You good gunslinger.
we're quite a helpful, approachable bunch. So I would say if just us, any Nuffield scholars, pick up the phone, explain that you're looking at putting an application in, talk to us, we'll help and give you some guidance and tips of how, first of all, to do a good application and the sorts of things that have been looked for. And probably more importantly, if you get called for interview, and I think it's Matthew, correct me if I'm wrong, about a 50% success rate, get called for interview. And I think preparing for that interview, I don't want to make it sound a horrible, tortuous, onerous process, but if you prepare for that interview, you will get a lot more out of it. So those are my two tips.
Matthew, if you just follow up on that, please.
My first tip would be just do it. Get on, just do it. And make sure that you engage with Nuffield through the website, and they'll help you and direct you to whoever they feel is best able to help you put your best foot forward. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is I would encourage everyone to study 1 or 2 past reports and dip in and out of 1 or 2 of those and see that there's a whole range of styles of writing. Some of them are very learned, others are very socially media orientated. There's a range in there. So I think I want to encourage everyone that whatever happens, everyone can engage with it. And whatever I mean by whatever happens is that Phil is right in that there's typically many more written applications than those that are invited for interview, and I'm hoping that we have even more applications this year, and it's a really tough job that first day when we're sifting out to get to interview stage, as it were. And the other thing is that we are approachable as selectors. Ed, you might just describe your experience through the selection process, and because I think that was my first year.
Well, I opted to go for a mock interview, which I found enormously helpful. And for those that are thinking of applying, I would strongly urge them to attend. It's a really good opportunity to verbalize some of their answers and confirm in their own hearts if this is something that they really want to commit to. And those that go on to the main interview itself, and I seem to recall, Matthew, you interviewed me as well. It was a tough interview, but it was only 15 minutes, and I think that really shows if you are committed. So it's a memorable occasion, but once you're through it, it's wonderful. And as William Hare, who's just sent a chat message through, says that effectively, and I'm paraphrasing here, once you're within the Nuffield family, it's all about what unites us rather than divides us, and I think that is absolutely true. So we've probably got 30 seconds left, and I wanted to say to you all, thank you so much for joining in, making it such a wonderful discussion, making yourselves available and giving just a quick overview as to what it's all about. Thanks enormously to the sponsors who have made all of this possible. And if you want to dip back into this, it will be available on YouTube in the next few days. Keep following up on the Land Management 2.0 webinar series. Plenty more of inviting discussions to be had. And just to reiterate again, all of us are available at the end of this in the coming weeks to help you with an application, with queries, or anything else Nuffield related. So based on that, thank you all. Thank you very much. And had a nice cool afternoon on the hottest day of the year. Thank you all so much. Goodbye.